Okay, picking up where we left off, we're talking about how to make local authentication work with Samba, which is not really a great idea. Because basically what we're talking about is you'll be assigned another password that you have to use every time you connect to the Samba share. I don't want another password. I don't know about you guys, but here's how it would work. So I would set the security equal to user. I'd turn guest account off. I'd say, okay, all the valid users are belong to this group. That means I would have to go create a group called SMB group, add users to that group, and then run this thing called SMB password. And I would assign a password to each one of the users who are going to be connecting to this. Wow. I mean, if you're shaking your head now going, do what? Well, then, yeah, you kind of see. Then you have to change the ownership of the mount point, right, to be able to use that group. Kind of makes sense, so that whatever the people to connect to it, they'll be able to do the thing they're supposed to do. What makes most sense, of course, is to use Active Directory, or if you had some sort of a third-party thing. And so for security equals user, you would say security equals ADS, Active Directories. And then you'd give it the name. There's a thing called a Kerberos realm, all these other things. And so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But configuring shares on page 823, there's a thing called the valid users. And so there's a cool little shortcut where you can use a %S to a way to convert their home directories over. Kind of weird. Okay, time to share files. Now remember there was a homework assignment, well, where we have two users like engineer, and we have somebody in sales, and therefore you had to create a third group called engineer sales, and then set the permissions up so that both people could write to that directory. Remember that? Okay. So you'd have valid users, like maybe an asterisk, ENG sales, or whatever that combo thing is. You'd have to create a new UMask for that. So when files got created, you have to have the right permission on that middle piece or the group piece. Okay. So you'd have a directory mask and all the rest of that stuff. Okay. So how do you mount file shares from the other end, the client piece? Well, you need to install the client parts. Well, okay. So let me get focused first. And let's go do that. Okay, so it's going to be sudo apt git install CIFS-utils. By the way, isn't it kind of cool when I told you the CFS doesn't exist anymore, then we turn right around and use it in the command line? Hey, give me a break, guys. I can't tell you what's going on there. So, remember how the mounts are done by individual users, typically not at the server level, particularly if you're providing your own name and password every time you do that. That kind of sucks. So when you do that, all the files appear like they belong to the current user. So when you go to an SMB share and ask for file permit, do an ls-al, all the users are you. Okay, just saying. So let's pretend like we're going to do one. Here we go. So I want to say amount minus the type, and it's going to CIFS. And then I have to tell what user. So I don't know. Username equal to Bob. And then remember how in the Windows world, this is how you would do it, like the // server 1 / share 1, something like that, right? Because you would give the server name and the file name. Kind of makes sense? Okay. And then some local mount point, whatever that is. So that's how it would look. Now, if you had this thing set up with permissions, well, then you could go in and do more. You could put in the password on the command line. I don't necessarily recommend it. But there's an awful lot of other mount options here. So the I could turn on, I want to map this, since this is me now, not running sudo. I can say, well, I want my UID to be this, I want my group ID to be this. And unfortunately, the UMask thing doesn't actually work here for some reason. Actually, it kind of sort of used to work. UMass used to work in mounting a CIFS, but they broke it up into two different ones. Now there's one called a file mask and a dir mask. Why they separated the two of them, I don't know. But now, instead of a single UMass thing, there's a file one and a directory one, which is kind of weird. Okay, so if you want to take ownership of things as they come across during the mount file, I would probably have to go in and say, I would add things in here. You know, I want to do Bob. I would go in here and say, okay, so UID is 1,000, or Bob is actually probably 1,000. It doesn't really matter, but he's probably like 1,002, and his GID is probably 1,002. I don't remember what his ID is, but that's how you would do it to mount the guy so that I own everything at the other end. Okay, now one of the weird things you can do is you can browse these shares without actually creating a mount point. Okay? There's a thing called SMB client, and you could go in there and say, I want to look at the server. Now, I can't actually do that here because we don't have a server up and running. But here's, I'll pretend, okay? So I'm just going to do SMB client minus L, and then the server name, whatever it is, you know, server 1, like this. And maybe even tell, you know, what can Joe see, you know, if you're Joe. So don't give me everything. Give me everything that Joe can see. And that would be like browsing the network. You know how it is in the Windows world. You go in there and hit network neighborhood, and it would show all the things. That's what we're talking about here, showing you everything that Joe can see. Kind of cool. You could even use the SMB client to essentially mount something in there without actually using the mount command, although I don't ever use that. Now, there's a problem in text files that were created in the Windows world versus the Linux world. One of them uses character return and line feed, and one of them just use a line feed. And so text files don't look the same when you switch them back and forth between the two worlds. And so you probably have to use, if you wanted to, when you copy a text file across, there's one called from DOS and one called to DOS. You know, from DOS or to DOS to be able to convert back and forth. And by the way, if you were ever curious who wrote those utilities, I did. Yeah, I'm the guy who wrote those. Just one of those interesting little tidbits. Okay, on page 826, they talk about security. So I can say host allow and host deny. I can go to firewall, and UDP uses lots of different, the SMB uses lots of different port numbers. It uses UDP 137 to 139 and TCP 137, 139, and 445. So in our case, what we'll probably have to do, just to make it a little easier, is we'll probably just disable, when we get to that point, we'll probably just disable our firewall. I know that's not smart, but it's just going to make the homework run so much faster if you just say, screw it, we're not doing that. Okay, we talked about the status command. There's a couple more things that the status command can do. So since I don't have one running, let's pretend like what the status command would show us. It would show me the people that are connected. It tells me all the services. So in this case, there's a service called admin and whatever, depot, whatever that is, and client. And here's all the files that are currently being used. You know, lots and lots of stuff. I can't demo that here. So one of the things you might have to do is configure the logging for this, because how much stuff do you want? So there's a log file, and there's a maximum log file size, and maybe you could go in there and set a level, like I only want to see, you know, where things go wrong, not where things work, things like that. And then, of course, one of the things you can do is map character sets, because SMB was kind of sort of intended to be a UTF-8 character set, and if you don't have that, you're probably going to have to go in there and tweak it a bit. Okay, so once again, at the end of the lecture notes, there's a URL that points to the location where you can go get more information about how to do this, because you are going to have to do this in both a server and client environment in an upcoming term assignment. Okay, we've reached the end of this chapter, and we'll see you guys again in some future chapter.